Have you ever sat in the quiet of your home and wondered when your child stopped looking at you the same way? Not with anger or loud defiance, but with something even more painful, dismissal. That subtle, sharp edge of being brushed off, spoken to like your words don't matter, or treated like your presence is just expected, not appreciated. It creeps in slowly, doesn't it? One day they're leaning on you, asking for your wisdom, and the next, they speak over you, correct you, roll their eyes at your stories. They might not even realize they're doing it. But you do. And it stings in a way only a parent can understand. You gave your whole heart raising them. You sacrificed without keeping score. And now, as the world grows a little quieter, you begin to notice that your opinion no longer carries the weight it once did. Your presence, instead of being honored, feels like it's being tolerated. Let's pause here. I want you to know something. This feeling you carry, it is valid. It is real. And you are not imagining it. You are not being too sensitive or old-fashioned. You are someone who has lived, loved, and given deeply. And if somewhere along the way your children have begun to forget what that means, it doesn't mean you must forget who you are. The truth is, respect is not something we can beg for. And it certainly shouldn't be something we have to demand. Respect that lasts comes from presence, not pressure. And that presence, the quiet power of knowing your worth, that is what we are here to remember together. There's a story I often think about. A woman named Evelyn, now 68, who used to spend hours cooking for her adult children every Sunday. It was her way of staying connected. She'd shop on Friday, prepare on Saturday, and cook on Sunday. Her kids would show up late, talk mostly to each other, and leave without much more than a passing thanks. One day after they'd left, Evelyn stood in her kitchen, surrounded by dishes, and she finally let herself feel what she'd been avoiding for years. She felt invisible. Not because she needed applause, but because she no longer felt like her presence had any value unless she was doing something for them. That moment, standing there with her hands in the sink, was the beginning of her return to herself. The first thing Evelyn did wasn't dramatic. She didn't confront anyone. She simply stopped hosting, not out of anger, but out of love for herself. She told her children kindly, "I love our time together, but I've decided to stop cooking every week. If you'd like to see me, let's go for a walk or meet for tea." And then she stuck to it. At first, her kids were surprised, a little annoyed even. But eventually, they started calling just to talk. They stopped expecting, and they began appreciating. That's the quiet power of reclaiming your space. If your children don't respect you anymore, not with cruel words, but with that subtle erosion of value, then one of the first and most powerful things you can do is shift your energy. Not by fighting for their attention, but by centering your own. It might feel unfamiliar at first, even a bit lonely. But in that space, something beautiful begins to bloom. The parts of yourself that were put aside to make room for everyone else, they come back. You start making decisions not to please others, but to honor yourself. And that shift, it speaks louder than any lecture. Another story that comes to mind is about a man named Walter. In his early 70s, Walter had always been the one to call, to check in, to remind his son about appointments, to send birthday money to his grandkids, even when it wasn't acknowledged. One day, he realized he hadn't received a single call in over 2 months. Not a message, not a visit. Just silence unless he reached out first. Instead of stewing in resentment or guilt, Walter made one small, powerful change. He stopped chasing. He stopped calling every week and started doing something else. He joined a small community choir. He said yes to a hiking group for seniors. And without fanfare, he quietly got on with living. And then, something shifted. His son noticed. He called. "Hey, Dad, haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" Walter smiled and simply said, "Yes, everything's good. I've been busy." That's it, no guilt, no lecture, just truth. The power in that moment wasn't in punishing or withdrawing. It was in showing that his life had value beyond being someone's emotional backup. When you begin to honor yourself in this way, not out of spite but out of love, you send a message to the world and to your children that you are not waiting to be chosen. You have already chosen yourself, and that's not selfish, that's sacred. You are not here to fill in everyone else's emotional gaps. You are not required to stay small just to avoid rocking the boat. And you are certainly not obligated to keep giving to those who no longer see the beauty of your giving. Respect begins with presence, with how you carry yourself, with the quiet decisions you make that say, "I matter." And the beautiful thing is, when you start to live that truth, others begin to feel it. Not because you've told them, but because you've shown them. You're not invisible. You've just been shining your light in places where no one's been looking. It's time to turn that light inward. It's time to remember who you were before they stopped listening and become someone even stronger now that you've started listening to yourself again. Shall we keep going? Let's take a deeper breath together, because what we're talking about isn't just a parenting issue. It's a heart issue, a self-worth issue. And so much of it begins with the quiet patterns we've carried for decades, without even realizing they were slowly eroding the ground beneath our own feet. You see, it's not always about what our children do or don't say. Sometimes the real question is, what have we taught them to expect from us? And I say that gently, not to blame, but to awaken. There's a woman I once knew, Margaret, in her 60s, with soft eyes and the kind of voice that made you lean in to listen. Margaret had spent most of her life trying to be easy. She didn't complain, didn't ask for much, always smiled even when she was hurting. Her grown daughter would speak to her curtly at times, interrupt her, dismiss her ideas, and Margaret would just nod, laugh it off, and change the subject. But one day, sitting across from me over tea, she said something that stopped me cold. I've taught her that I'm not someone who gets upset, that I'm okay with anything. So how can I be mad when she believes me? That's when we started talking about boundaries. Not walls, not ultimatums, but gentle, clear lines that protect our dignity. Margaret began with something simple. The next time her daughter cut her off mid-sentence, Margaret paused and quietly said, "Please let me finish. I'd really like to be heard." Not with anger, not with bitterness, just truth, and it was uncomfortable. Her daughter blinked, surprised, but she didn't argue. She let her mother speak. That moment planted a seed. It's in those tiny shifts that power begins to return. Maybe you've also made it a habit to keep the peace at the cost of your voice, to smooth over tension by pretending it doesn't bother you. But every time we do that, every time we swallow our truth just to keep love close, we teach others to love only the version of us that is easy for them to handle. And that's not real respect. Real respect begins with how we treat ourselves in the quiet. It's how we speak to ourselves in the mirror when no one's watching. It's how we decide slowly and steadily that being liked is not more important than being honored. So if you've been avoiding conflict, if the idea of saying no or "that hurt me" feels impossible, I want to remind you, calm truth is not conflict. It's clarity. And clarity is a gift. Let me tell you about Frank. Frank was the kind of man who handled everything: bills, problems, grandkids, rides to school. Even after retirement, he never slowed down. His adult children came to him with every problem, but rarely with gratitude. One day, after spending an entire week helping his daughter move, she didn't even thank him. She handed him a list of things to fix in her new apartment. And for the first time, Frank paused. He looked at her not unkindly and said, "I love helping you, but I'm starting to feel more like a handyman than a father. I think I need to step back for a while." His daughter didn't know what to say. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't a cold shoulder. It was Frank finally realizing that being constantly needed is not the same as being respected. And something interesting happened. His daughter called him 2 days later, not to ask for something, but to talk. For the first time in months, when we let go of our need to be needed, we open the door for something deeper: connection without condition. It's not easy, especially when you've spent your whole life showing love through service. But there's a difference between serving out of love and serving out of fear of being forgotten, unloved, or irrelevant. The truth is, your worth doesn't lie in what you do for others. It lies in the space you hold for yourself quietly, even when no one notices. And once you begin to reclaim that space by pausing before you say yes, by gently correcting someone who cuts you off, by choosing solitude over self-sacrifice, you begin to glow differently. People can feel it. They may not understand it at first. They may resist the change. But something in them will shift because something in you has settled. And that brings us to one of the most powerful transformations of all learning: that love given without boundaries will often be taken without thought. But love given with quiet clarity, that's unforgettable. You are not here to beg for respect. You are here to embody it. Not with anger, not with rebellion, but with presence, with stillness, with the kind of dignity that doesn't shout but also doesn't shrink. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't have to justify needing rest, needing space, needing peace. The ones who truly love you will adjust. The ones who can't may drift. And either way, you'll still be whole, because your peace is not a privilege. It's a right. And it's time you claimed it again. Let's keep walking this path together. When you begin to stand in quiet self-respect, the world around you doesn't always shift immediately. But something subtle begins to change in the air. People respond to energy, not effort. And when your energy no longer says, "I need you to see me," but instead says, "I already see myself," they notice even if they never say it out loud. There's a kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice, a kind of presence that speaks without words. And it grows in the stillness of self-awareness, not in the noise of trying to be validated. Let me share something about Helen. She was in her early 70s when her son started brushing her off. Phone calls went unanswered. Holidays felt more like obligations than celebrations. When he did call, the conversation was rushed, often interrupted by his kids or his phone buzzing in the background. She felt like an afterthought. But Helen, after years of keeping quiet, began to shift her response, not with coldness, but with certainty. Instead of reaching out repeatedly, she waited. She didn't flood him with messages. She didn't guilt him. When he finally did call her, tone was gentle but firm. She said, "I love hearing from you, but I'm also learning to enjoy my time. So if you want to talk, let's make it meaningful." At first, he was surprised, maybe even a little defensive. But over time, he started showing up with more presence. Because something had changed. Helen had reclaimed her value. And her son had no choice but to rise to meet her where she stood. This is what it means to embody respect, rather than chase it. And that embodiment isn't about dramatic gestures. It's in the daily choices, the boundaries we hold, the dignity we protect, the silence we no longer fear. You don't have to explain your worth. You only have to stop treating it like it's negotiable. So what does that look like in everyday life? It looks like deciding what kind of energy you'll allow in your space. If a conversation feels disrespectful, you can excuse yourself. Not as a punishment, but as a reminder to yourself that peace is precious. It looks like finding joy that isn't tied to whether someone calls you or not. Maybe you pick up painting again. Maybe you join a walking group or plant a garden or visit a museum alone, not to fill the silence, but to fill your soul. When your joy no longer depends on someone else showing up, you become magnetic. You glow from within. And people, yes, even your children, begin to feel it. It looks like telling the truth gently. If your child dismisses your opinion, you can say, "I understand you may not agree, but I still have a voice. I'd like you to hear me, not to win the argument, but to reclaim the space your voice deserves. When your children see that you're no longer operating from fear or emotional dependence, it resets the dynamic. Suddenly, you're not the parent chasing after their affection. You're the person they want to draw near to because you've become a mirror for something they didn't even know they needed: grounded, graceful strength. And here's something you must remember. You're not doing this to change them. You're doing this to come home to yourself. If they shift, wonderful. If they don't, your peace is still intact. That's the difference. You're no longer bending yourself into shapes just to fit into their lives. You're standing tall in the shape you've grown into: unapologetic, wise, whole. And from that posture, everything starts to look different. The silence no longer feels like rejection. It becomes rest. The lack of praise no longer wounds. You know your value. The distance no longer feels like punishment. You've built a life close to your own heart. This is how quiet power works. It doesn't beg. It doesn't plead. It doesn't collapse when not seen. It radiates calmly from the inside out. So if your children are still pulling away, if they still treat you like background noise, that's okay. Let them feel the absence of your chasing. Let them sit in the echo of your dignity. Because over time, the strongest message is not the one we shout, but the one we live. And the message you are now living is this: I am no longer available for disrespect, no matter how subtle. I am no longer giving away my peace to prove I'm worthy. I have earned this stage of life, and I will live it with clarity, joy, and strength. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. And from there, everything, whether it stays or leaves, makes more sense. Let's keep walking this path with that light in our hearts. You're doing beautifully. If you're still with me now, I want to pause and say something simple but sincere. Thank you. Thank you for staying through this message, for opening your heart, for giving yourself this moment of reflection. It's not always easy to listen to words that touch on such quiet pain, especially the kind that builds over years, tucked behind smiles and silence. But here you are. And that means something. It means you're not done growing. You're not done reclaiming. You're not done choosing your peace, even if it's late in the game. Because it's never too late to come back home to yourself. If anything in this video made you feel seen, truly seen, I'd love to hear from you. You're not alone in this. So many others are walking a similar road, often in silence. But your story matters. Has your relationship with your adult children changed over time? Did you go through a season where you felt disrespected, unseen, or even used? And what helped you slowly find your footing again? If you feel comfortable, share a bit of that story in the comments. You'd be surprised how healing it is for you and for the others reading it. Sometimes just knowing that someone else understands can be the difference between feeling invisible and feeling valued. And if this message gave you even a small bit of strength, I'd be honored if you'd consider subscribing to this channel. Not for numbers or noise, but so we can keep walking this journey together. You see, what we're building here isn't just a video or a moment. It's a quiet community. A space where wisdom isn't overlooked, where aging isn't dismissed, and where dignity is gently restored, one breath at a time. You don't have to chase anymore. You don't have to perform or earn your way into someone's respect. You just have to remember who you are beneath all the roles you've carried. A whole person. A heart still beating with purpose. A soul that deserves rest, love, and reverence. So thank you for letting me speak with you today. May you move forward from here with a little more clarity, a little more confidence, and a whole lot more self-respect. And when the moments come, those little stings of being overlooked or dismissed, pause, breathe, and remind yourself gently, I am no longer chasing, I am standing, and that is enough. Until next time, take care of your peace, and let it take care of you. We'll talk again soon.